All right. Before we get into how we fared on our, I think, second immutable distro on the show, well, I want to kind of talk about what even is immutability. And another word that came up in the history was atomic.
Right.
So we got. I want to spend some time talking about those things because different distributions say immutable, but then they mean different things.
They do.
Atomic, okay, let's define that one first because that one's easy to define. Atomic is essentially, if you're talking about an update, let's say you are getting an atomic update. If the update is incorrectly applied, causes issues, or is interrupted in any way, the update is not applied. It's one big blob. You throw it on there.
Right.
If for some reason it doesn't work, you just keep using what you were using before.
I think so, yeah. So the atomic bits are like a giant container that have all of the other little bits that are inside of it. So that's another way I think of thinking of it. Okay. And so when you get the update, you get the whole entire thing. Not just the little individual bits that are inside of it.
Right.
So that's another way.
Yeah. And that's what makes like so when you're updating, if we're talking about atomic updates, if you're interrupted, if you know the power is pulled from your computer, because we're talking about a holistic update,
right,
the whole thing, then if the whole thing is not successful, then the whole thing doesn't get applied.
Right, and you need to start all over again.
Exactly, and as annoying as that might be, it is a safety catch, and one that I am absolutely happy for because I'm running on an unsupported system over here. If these updates don't apply, I'm not left with a smoking husk, and that I think is a really, really good thing.
Yeah, in a way, it does some verification before it actually gets rolled in to being the thing that you're going to use. So that is really good.
Exactly. Okay. Now we're getting into sketchy territory. We have to define immutable.
Right.
All right. So I was able to get around on the web, and I know I missed some, but I would like you to let me know, those of you listening, which ones I missed, because it's a much broader conversation, and I think there are additional definitions of immutability that we're not going to cover here unintentionally. But I got some big ones.
Well, I before we do that, though, I just want to take the word and pick that apart a little bit. I mean, so immutability. So immutable means that you can't change parts of the system, or maybe even the whole system. But like there are things that can't be changed by the end user. Essentially, is the concept behind that, right?
Exactly, and to be extremely like, look at the root of the word kind of thing. I think about it like when you're watching a TV show, right? If it is immutable, not mutable, that means that like you can't even go in and press the mute button on the audio to turn it off. Like you can't, that's how little you can change about it.
Yep.
But there's so much nuance there.
There really is.
And that's why I think I never took an interest in it, because every time I saw the word immutable, people were using it in a way that I had never seen it used before, and I'm like, nobody even knows what they're talking about. What if immutable can mean 12 different things? It doesn't mean anything. So I'm going to ignore it all. And I did. I very much did ignore immutability a lot.
That's fair.
But we couldn't ignore it again. We kind of ignored the idea with the endless episode, but we can't really ignore it here because this is, I mean, to be honest, Silverblue is one of the ones that I saw a lot about the word immutability, and I didn't know what they were talking about.
Well, I guess even though the systems operate in similar fashions, the target audience is different for both of them in a way, right? So endless is targeted more towards education and that sort of thing, Whereas I feel like Silverblue and all of those types of things, they're targeted more towards developers and people that are like tinkers and whatnot, right?
Developers.
They're not Microsoft.
Yeah, I was going to say, are you old enough to remember that Ballmer did that? I don't know. All right, so let's start at the top. The one we're actually talking about, Silverblue, the OS tree or rpm-ostree style immutability. In this case, what it really means is that you've got a core of the system that is immutable. So there are going to be essentially a lot of the base system things that you really shouldn't be messing with in the first place, honestly, but it's not so rigid. This is why I don't like the word immutable in this case.
Yeah, it's not the entire system. It's only parts of the system that are immutable. Yeah.
Right. So like Etsy is still open for you to be able to make configuration changes in. So right, exactly what Dan said. It's not, the whole system's not immutable. Parts of the system are immutable. And because of that, you can really get down into the weeds and change things about the system. And then on top of that, there's this idea of layering, which came up early on in the history, where you can you have this immutable part of the system that cannot be changed, but then you can go and say, you know what? I want the RPM Fusion repositories to be added, and I'm going to install the ffmpeg libs from there, and I'm going to install... I installed btop. I was talking about Aristocratus earlier, and I installed btop from the Fedora repositories, which is a layer on top of the OS tree, which is immutable, right?
The little bit of nuance there that's different is you're not changing the running system in that instance, right? You're changing what you are proposing to be the next running system, not what you're currently running.
That's how microOS works as well, right? So you add these packages on there. But the thing that you have to be careful with about on a Silverblue system or a microOS system is that when you install this software on there, it is not immediately available.
Right.
If I did rpm-ostree install btop, I could not, after it's done, and it takes a little while sometimes, I couldn't just go in and just type in btop and just hit enter, and then btop was going. It didn't work that way.
Right.
You had to reboot into the new tree to which btop was added, and then you get access to btop. But here's the beautiful part about it, though, is that when you make all these changes to an OS tree style system or even a micro OS system, you can come back from that.
Yes.
So if I install a bunch of packages that borked up my system, I could just reboot into the previous image, and it's all there. So you've seen the grub screen with 2 or 3 different options. There are more options when you're dealing with Silverblue, and you can set it to hold on to more, or you can slim it down if you like, but you have a few options, and you could just go back to the previous one and say, that was a bad idea.
Yeah, that didn't work out.
But you're back on a running system again, and it works just fine. So when I added Sodalite, it blew everything up, I could have just chosen the previous Silverblue image, and it would have been like I never ran that rpm-ostree install command in the first place. So microOS is very similar in the way that this works, except they don't use OS tree to build trees and push those out to you. microOS relies on Btrfs snapshots to do its rollbacks, and that's another big word that you see all the time, and it is exactly what it sounds like. If you make changes to the system and you don't like the way that they work, you don't have to undo all of that. You just choose the previous image and boot into the previous image, and it's like nothing ever happened. So rollback is another term that comes up a lot. But microOS uses Btrfs to do this type of immutability.
Yeah, so that's like tracking your micro changes.
Yeah. I wonder, is that why they named it that?
I don't know, but it works for me.
Man, you know what? They need to hire
they should market
you.
That.
Yeah,
they should.
Dan the marketeer needs to be Dan the SUSE marketeer. That was good.
Yeah, maybe.
So then you have this other style, which is, I think, what a lot of people think of when they think of immutability. When you get that bird's eye quick view of immutability, there is the Chrome OS style. Now, Chrome OS closer to 2018 than Chrome OS 2023 because Chrome OS was just straight up a blob. And when you updated, they gave you a whole system. You downloaded the whole thing. It added it to the system, you rebooted, and you booted into a whole system. Everything was there for you. There is no picking apart the system. You can't change things, and if it doesn't run in Chrome, well, guess what? It doesn't run. So you are extremely limited in what you can do to the system. But, for an operating system that needs to be able to boot every single time without fail, it is a really good way of doing updates and keeping things up to date and making sure that people have a reliable system. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah, well,
this is not shade in any way. It is a great way to deal with it.
Well, Chrome OS is not the only one that really has latched onto that either.
No.
Mac OS works very similar to that.
Sure does. Absolutely does. And another system that runs a lot like that is Vanilla OS. They have what they call the ABRoot type, and that, while not exactly the same, is very much the way that Chrome OS does things in 2023. So Vanilla OS gives you that same style of here's the whole system. Upgrade the whole system. And if that doesn't work, go back to the previous one. But if it does work, boot into the new one and just keep moving. The way that they do software is using things like DistroBox, which is Podman underneath, and then you install your software in those containers. But Vanilla OS exposes that software so that, if you install Firefox from Arch, the way that we did in the Debian episode, it just shows up and it works, and you launch it, and you don't care. It just works.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
Unless you install the one from Fedora, in which case Plex doesn't work. But Chrome OS is now doing a whole lot more of this, where you have containers and you can even run VMs and things in Chrome OS now.
They're like LXD. It's LXD, I think, under the hood.
Okay.
Is what they're using, and so you can use any of those type of containerized applications on top of LXD.
Yeah. So,
and I think they spin up Debian-based things. So, there's a lot of different Deb packages available for sure. And even some, like when you think about it, some Arch packages actually use Deb sources to get created when you look at like an AOR type of
I was going to say, aren't those the ones that even the AOR users make fun of?
Yeah, but then like AOR, I think, pulls down some of those same things.
Yeah.
So there you go.
I have no problem with them. Listen, man, if I'm running an Arch system, right? I don't care how you give me my software, as long as I get the software without viruses, obviously. But you know what I mean?
Well, yes, please.
Like, as long as I get my software, I don't care if it was a Deb prior to this. So
right.
So all right. So you have that full-on system. Everything is hard-coded, kind of. You can't really change much of anything about it, the underlying system at least, with Vanilla OS and Chrome OS. And then you have the last type, Ubuntu Core type, that is really new in the arena, and I personally am excited about, though not a huge fan of snaps, though I don't particularly. I like them server-side, to be honest, man. Like, snaps are fantastic server-side. On the desktop, I'm still a little lukewarm on it. But I'm warming up. to it. But it is just a really interesting.
It's an interesting concept.
Yeah, because it's not like the other immutables. It's a different.
It is not.
It's why it's so frustrating, man. They're all immutables, but they're all different. So
right,
Ubuntu breaks their immutability up into 4 parts, and each is immutable in its own way. So you have the gadget part, which is like the bootloader and the partition layout and configurations for your snaps. Then there's the kernel part that obviously is the kernel and the drivers. There's the base part, which people expect to kind of be immutable, which is the minimal Ubuntu. And it contains like services and utilities and stuff, the stuff you'd expect in like USR, that. And then Snap, which is what like the other ones have to use like layering or containers with, Ubuntu will use snaps to run their software with, and that's how you get this interchangeable system. And each of those 4 parts can be removed and replaced individually or all together. If
all together,
if there's a security bug in all of them, give me all of them. That'd be great.
Yeah, and so they're delivering these. The way I understand it, they're delivering these things through the snap system. But like your kernel is not snap. It's not a snap that's running.
Right.
It's actually depositing, a blob. We'll call it a blob. It's depositing a blob onto your system via the snap package system.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not a containerized kernel, but that's the method they're using to get it onto your system.
Right. So all of these things, and I don't even know if we cleared it up at all, but suffice it to say that there's all kinds of immutability. And if you're interested in immutability, if you're interested in this, there are parts of your system that you can't change for safety's sake, then any of the options are a good primer. I think they all kind of work.
I think it's something to keep an eye on, for sure.
I'm all in, man. My phone already works like this, and I don't particularly care about it.
Absolutely.
So, why shouldn't my laptop work like this too? And I have the same kind of idea of reliability. When I shake my laptop, it should wake up and say, "All right, what do you want to do?" And I shouldn't ever have to wonder whether or not my laptop's going to wake up. Like that. That is, it's a good feeling on the phone. And I feel like it'd be a good feeling on the laptop too. But I think each one kind of gives a certain amount of tinkerability. I think MicroOS and Silverblue are the most tinkerable.
Yeah, I agree with that.
But there's a bit of a trade-off, right? Layering with rpm-ostree is a bit more involved than just DNF install whatever. So
yeah.
And then RPM Fusion has a thing at the bottom of their thing. Whenever you're dealing with OSTree on how to install RPM Fusion, and they use the word evil. The way that it works, the way that rebasing in OSTree, so rebasing is like going from Fedora 37 to Fedora 38, the way that it affects RPM Fusion, they use the word evil for what you have to do to allow yourself to upgrade RPM Fusion to the next version of Fedora. When I went in and read the forum post about it, and the communications about it, it didn't really seem that dire. But that's not what
it's not a great descriptor.
That's not what the wiki said. The official RPM Fusion wiki, when it was telling me, it really drove home, because it had yellow caution symbol, and then 4 words in, it was evil, and I was whoa.
Yeah, woo.
All right, no,
you got my attention.
Yeah, sure enough. All right, so there's your immutability primer.
At least the way we know it.
Yeah. I know there's a whole lot of ways to improve that primer.
I think we glossed over some things, but that's okay. For the most part, that's really the concepts that are there.
Prior, I was like, yeah, we're going to come back and we're going to have a really good explanation about what immutability is. It did not occur to me that there were 7 different definitions of immutable. Which immutability are we defining? I don't know. So we definitely glossed over some. But there's some basics. There's your immutability primer, and then you can take that information and do with it whatever you want.